Hello. Happy Thursday. Happy first week of July. Can you believe it's July? That makes me sad because that means the summer is almost over. And what a summer we've had. So it's just by coincidence. Just by coincidence. For those of you who are listening live, man, where were you about an hour ago when the storms rode through here? I was at the tennis center. And I was telling people, it never rains this hard for more than 10 minutes at a time. It may continue to rain throughout the afternoon, but it will be sporadically. It will rain really hard, it will stop, and then it will rain really hard again. It literally rained very hard for like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes straight. I was driving home. The water was up at the doors of the shops along Kenilworth Avenue. It was just like I was driving through Old Town, Virginia or something. So what's your afternoon been like? And we would just happen to be talking today, if you can see the little footnote there. Are you afraid of the storms? It was thundering and lightning a bit, and there are a lot of children out at the tennis center. They didn't seem to be bothered by it. But a lot of people get a little antsy when it starts to thunder and lightning. But more importantly, the storms of life. How do you deal with the storms of life? You know, we deal with the storms of life. What do the storms of life look like? How does that defined in your life? You know, that's when we suddenly lose a loved one. That can bring on major sadness, some anxiety, a little depression. And then there's the anxieties of life. There's wondering and anticipating if, COVID's going to come back again, if you're going to lose a loved one due to some type of wildfire or smoke that's in the air. It's a lot of things we've been a little anxious about here lately. And then there's sorrow in general, So a lot of times we go through this. These are the roller coasters of life. Sometimes we're up, sometimes we're down. And honestly, I think that's what makes life a little exciting. I don't think I would want to be at the peak all the time. I definitely wouldn't want to be in the valley all the time. But I think the anticipation of knowing that the mountaintop is coming when you're in the valley, and the anticipation of knowing in order to get to the higher mountaintop, we're going to have to temporarily go through the valley. And so that's just looking at it from peripheral view. I want to get into the nitty-gritty of what's happening inside of us during the storms and how we can be calm and deal with the storm for just what it is. It's just a passing thing. It's never going to be a long-term season in your life, no matter what type of storm you're dealing with. And Jesus gives us a perfect example. We have to be careful. It's a warm day. I'm feeling very warm. I'm feeling very warm. I don't know if I'm looking very warm. Am I like glistening? Because I'm like wet. So anyway, let's talk about it. And this particular storm actually didn't deal with water, rain. It was actually the storm of the rushing of the waves bellowing against the boat. And that water from the waves is what actually makes people think that it was a rainstorm, but it actually wasn't. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the storm that the disciples went through with Jesus. The wind and the waves obey Jesus. Thank Lord. We are actually in the last few scriptures, last few verses of chapter 4. Next time that we meet, we will be talking about a demon-possessed man in chapter 5. So, 35 through 39 is what we're focusing on today. Mark, the 4th chapter. And it says, reading from the New King James Version, on the same day when evening had come, he said to them, let us cross over to the other side. Now when they had left the multitude, they took him along in a boat, and it was he. The other side of the boats were with him as well. And a great windstorm arose. A windstorm, not a thunderstorm. A windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" And they feared exceedingly and said to one another, "Who can this be, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" It's a lot going on here. And our focus has been Mark, the Gospel of Mark, because Mark is one of the shortest Gospels, the shortest Gospel, and it teaches you how to be a disciple. So Mark is about the action part of everything that's going on. And so we're going to focus on the action part of this, with a highlight that he said to them, "Why are you fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" What does having no faith have to do with thinking that you're going to perish in the boat, because the boat is filling with the water that's being beat up against the boat due to the winds, the high winds? But this is what Jesus is saying. Jesus is saying, why is it that you have no faith? But notice the sequence in which all of this happens. He doesn't say this, he doesn't rebuke them until after he puts them at peace, more or less. Until after he deals with their situation. That should be very comforting and encouraging to you and I, that when we are anxious, when we are sorrowful, when we are depressed, that whether we should be or not, whether we should be more mature to be able to handle that situation, we should be more prayerful instead of being anxious. Jesus knows our heart. He's been here, he's walked with us, and he's going to bring us into a sense of peace. He's going to help calm our anxieties, and then he's going to deal with the fact that we ought to know how to deal with that by now. But isn't it comforting to know that he who is our comforter will comfort us where we are in that need at that particular time, and then he'll deal with the logistical aspects later. That's wonderful. I just think that's beautiful. That's a beautiful part of this. So let's just kind of like break this down for a minute, and then we're going to move on, because it's a warm day, and I'm sure that you are warm wherever you are as well. So they're preaching and teaching, and Jesus says, let's cross over to the other side. He's going over to the other side because he's tired. How do we know he's tired? Because he was in the stern on a pillow. Back in those days, if you had a boat, there was a designated place sort of for the visitor. If you had a guest on the boat, then that would be near the front of the boat, the stern area, but obviously not the entire stern area, because you have to have the captain of the boat. So the captain of the boat would be like really closer to the tip of the boat. But right there behind him was a little area that typically had housed a pillow, a piece of carpet, and a small seat. And that's where Jesus was tucked away, getting some rest from spilling out, from having all of his energy drained out of him as he's teaching the multitude. And so he just wants to rest for a little while. But right as he's resting, then the storm comes. If you know the Sea of Galilee, they talk about the fact that the storm, the waves can be completely calm, and with no time at all, just at the flip of, just like those storms roll through here today, then those waves will start to kick up, and they'll bash up against a hard rock, and they can do just that, make a boat feel like it's swaying. And any fisherman back in that particular day can identify with this story, because they've all been caught there before. You and an athletic person, and you're out on a walk, or you're trying to squeeze in some time, and you're just saying, okay, you know, it may not rain, and you look up, the sky is clear, you run out. You know how storms come in the summertime, so you've been there before, you've experienced that before. So the story in and of itself is very familiar with individuals that not only were fishermen, but anybody that lived near the Sea of Galilee. And so this particular storm comes, and as it's coming and it's rocking the boat, it wasn't until they say that the boat began to fill with the water from the sea. So the boat is being rocked. If you can imagine the sea and the water, the boat is being rocked. And so as the boat is being rocked, the water, you lift it, tilt it a little to the side, the waves themselves are going to get in the water. Not rainstorm, but a windstorm. The wind was bellowing the boat, and that caused it to toss and turn, which allowed the water to get in. So it says it was quickly filling up. Now what's interesting is that they didn't have a peace of calm of knowing that he was there, but at the same time, they weren't trying to, it doesn't appear that they were trying to do this on their own. You know, if the water is being flipped from side to side, you're a fisherman. These are fishermen. You know, that's how Jesus called them to be. You know, a good portion of them. And so why did they not try and bellow the water out of the ship? And what was the difference in this particular storm than all of the storms that they had dealt with, obviously, on numerous occasions because of the environmental conditions of this area, the Sea of Galilee? They've had to have been through this before. So isn't that interesting too? Is that when we're independent, when we're having to deal with things on our own, we deal with them. And then when we start getting a little bit of help, we start becoming very dependent on our help. Like we don't know how to do this for ourselves anymore. And that's a good thing in the terms of in the life of the believer, because we're not supposed to do things on our own anymore. It is through the strength of God that we are who we are. One of my favorite passages, it says that the Lord is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in the time of trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. And if you hold on to that passage, I know many people know those first few verses of Psalms 46. But the thing is that when you really think about what that means, it says, the Lord is our refuge. What does that mean? It means that when we were out at the tennis center today and it started thundering and lightning, the 20 courts outside were empty and people came into the tennis facility. The tennis facility temporarily became their refuge. What's a refuge mean? A refuge means in that particular moment that I'm protected from the thunder and the lightning for the most part. I'm protected from the rain. I have a refuge. I have a place to go for safety. I have a place to go where I don't have to worry about the conditions of what's happening right now where I am. And Jesus, God says, He's our refuge. So in our conditions, if there's worry, if there's anxiety, if there's doubt, if there's fear, we can move away from that environment, all the conditions, everything that's having us feel like that, and go into our refuge. God is our refuge. And it says not only is He your refuge, but He's your strength. So imagine when you're tired and just overwhelmed with everything that's going on in life, your employer, your employees, your family, your friends, or just feel like you're under attack. And you just feel like you just have to gird yourself up and you have to do something. The Bible says He is our strength. Let Him be your strength. Let Him deal with that. And then it says, in addition to being our refuge and our strength, He is help, present help in the time of trouble. That means that whatever time that you're in, whatever moment of the situation that you're dealing with, in that present moment, that is your help. And that is understanding the presence of God. So I didn't want to get into that particular passage from Psalm, but this is what this particular verse is saying, because we would do ourselves an injustice to just look at this as some miracle where He just spoke to the waves and told the waves to be still. You know, that would have been some one-time event that happened some 2,000 years ago, and yeah, it was a nice miracle. But that is not the point of this being in the Word of God, the revelation for you and I, the Word that gives us instructions while we're living here on earth. So that miracle, yes, He spoke to the waves and the waves were still, but more importantly, the bigger picture here is that He presents Himself to His disciples and says, where's your faith? You're standing in the presence of the refuge. You're standing in the presence of the strength. You're standing in the presence of your present help in the time of trouble. Why are you fearful? Where's your faith? The faith starts to be, do you really believe in what you're selling? This is present day. Do you and I really believe that God is the creator of the heaven and the earth, that He is the supreme ruler and He is on the seat and nothing? Satan must get permission to do whatever he wants to do to attack you. He has to get permission from God. And a lot of times God allows him to do that because it's a testing that just allows us to be strengthened in our character, our perseverance, and all that other good stuff. But He's saying, I am here. As long as I am in your presence, there's no need to fear. You just have to have faith. And what is that faith? That faith is believing that I am who I say. I am the I am. And so that's the real point of that. It's a point that says that when we are in that sorrowful condition, there's a beautiful story about the garden, the guy that worked in the garden, and he just loved this particular flower. He just, all of the garden flowers were beautiful, but it was one particular flower that he just absolutely loved. And one morning he came out, the flower was gone, and he was just angst and upset and angry and cursing at everyone. And then the master gardener came along and was like, what's wrong with you? Why are you so upset? What's going on? And he says, my favorite flower is gone. And so the master gardener says, hush, I plucked it for myself. And that is what God says when we're in that sorrowful place where we've lost a loved one, or our spouse, or our child, or our parent, And God says, relax. I've brought them home to be with me. And so that is about the deepest sorrow that individuals go through. It's the loss of a loved one, whether it be a spouse, a parent, or a child. And when we understand that they are no longer here, but they're in the presence of our Lord and Savior, then that ought to be able to give us a peace that surpasses the understanding of the situation. It doesn't say that we won't miss the individual, but it just says that if we know God and we know what we can only imagine what it's like to be in His presence, we would have to be happy that our beautiful flower has gone to be with its Maker. And then in times of anxiety, the anxiety usually is some type of result of fear, that we're having. What are we to be afraid of? The battle has already been won. The victory is ours. We have eternal life, the gift of eternal life, which goes on and on and on and on and on. We're just in this journey here. So we have to always be thinking eternally. And while we're here, we do a great job. We have some great friends. We do all of that stuff. But the focus needs to be on the cross and where we're going. And that too is a peace that comes and surpasses the understanding of whatever storm you're going through at the time. And so this is what this passage is really saying. It's like, do not be fearful. Where's your faith? I am here in your presence. I used to tell people about the monk that can't think of his name, but he says if he had to preach every week, he would simply preach on the presence of God. If we get into the habit of living as though we are in the physical presence of God, most of our fears would go away, our anxieties would go away, our negativity would go away. If we start thinking in that realm that you can only be depressed if you bring a depressing thought into your mind. You can only not be happy and not be joyful if your thoughts are not happy and joyful. And so if we do a little exercise where for the next 3 days, the next 3 hours, we're not going to think anything negative. And that's not to say that we live in a cocoon or we remove ourselves from people, because we have to be around people in order to spread the gospel. But it's to say that when negativity comes, we just take it for what it is, but we're always looking at the positive side of it. And in doing that, it's the expression of being in the presence of Jesus, because if we're in His presence, then it doesn't matter what's going on around us, because we know that He has full control over that. And so this passage is trying to allow us, today's believers, 21st century believers, to get into practicing that Jesus is right there, resting right at the stern of your little ship that you're navigating through life in. And if that's the case, whatever obstacle, whatever detour you run into, you've got your captain right there. There's no need to be afraid. There's no need to wonder or to think or to doubt anything. The thing is to submit to His guidance, submit to His counseling, submit to His will, and all will be well. All will be well. You will be perfectly calm in the midst of the storm. And then the last thing is just something just to keep in mind, is notice what he says to the waves. He says, and a great storm came in. Then he arose and he said, peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. This is not the version. The version of, I think it's the New Living Translation. He's saying, be muzzled. He's telling the storms, the waves, to be still, when you look at the beginning of this chapter, in the first chapter of Mark, when we were looking at Jesus healing another demonic spirit. We're going to deal with a demonic spirit, or possessed man, demon-possessed man, in chapter 5. But in chapter 1, when he was in the synagogue, and the man came in, and he spoke to the demonic spirit, you know, because the man had says, Jesus, what do you have to do with us? Because the demons know Jesus. And Jesus was telling them to be quiet for the most part. And they left the man's body, and the period in which we're dealing with here, it was said to be that same type of demonic spirit was the same type of spirit that controlled portions of nature, especially when nature acted like this. And so whether it's the act of nature in a demon or a demon possession or whatever the case may be, it's the same God that can have the waters be still and have the demon inside of you not just be still but vacate your body. That thing that has your mind, that thing that strongholds you. Jesus can speak it out of you. And that's comforting and that's encouraging to us, because all we have to do is turn to Jesus. And you can't turn to him if you're not practicing being in his presence. And what does that look like? That looks like quiet time. That looks like meditating with him. That looks like reading his word where he's speaking to you. That looks like praying where you're communicating with him. So those are practices that we have to get into so that we feel comfortable when we're in our storms, that we are in a storm, but we're in the presence of God, and all will be well. All right. So today I'm excited because I had some people over for the 4th of July, and it was kind of last minute. Really was focusing a little more, some folks that I met that really are interested in raw food. So the focus was on carrot burgers that I was talking about earlier in the week. You know what I'm saying? It's really easy when you're juicing carrots every day. You take the pulp from the carrot, and you can do this just like you would make a hamburger. The same ingredients you would use for the hamburger, you put them in to the container with the carrot pulp. The carrot pulp being your ground beef. And then I talked about the same thing that you can do with lentils, and you can make chickpea burgers. And the great thing about both of those is that whenever you're soaking and sprouting, which you have to do with lentils and chickpeas when you want to make raw burgers like that, is that you are doubling the nutritional value. So already you have a good amount of protein in chickpeas. And so when you soak and sprout them, you're like tripling that effect. And it's raw, which means that it goes right into your blood system, so you see a big difference really quick. And so we're going to do all of that. So when you have people over to have a little something to eat, it's great that we're doing some raw burgers, and we had some raw hummus, and I took some squash and zucchini and made it to like spaghetti fins, and then we put some chopped up carrot burgers in there as like meatballs, so to speak. Did some raw cheese and some raw tomato paste, and just made it like a really little yummy dish. But then if you have people over, no matter what you're trying to advocate, people always want some dessert, something sweet. So then someone else had emailed me about a recipe, and I'm just like, seriously? We have like all of our videos where you can go find anything that you want. So look at this. I hope that you can see that we just have some stuff. Nothing is ever that complicated. And you can do whatever you want to do. In fact, I'm just thinking as I'm looking at this that I think I'm going to add something else. But we have peaches. So I got peaches from the market. I had probably a dozen or so. And they were starting to ripen, which is when you want to eat them. And you leave them out. Try not to refrigerate your fresh fruit if possible. And so I also had some plums, but they were the little small plums. If they were the larger size plums, we could have very well had used them. But so we're going to make a peach cobbler, because everybody loves peach cobbler for the 4th of July. That's one of those things. You have apple pie, or peach cobbler, or banana cream, or strawberry cream. So peach cobbler is like yum yum. So peach cobbler, I personally prefer walnuts in peaches. But you can do a pecan, you can do an almond, or whatever. So we're going to take our fruit, and then we're going to take some nuts, some seasoning blend. Remember, I always tell you that nutmeg, cinnamon are all excellent spices in terms of helping to circulate the blood. They have the same medicinal properties, so to speak, as cayenne pepper does for the body in terms of circulating the blood and getting things. If you ever feel like you're having a heart attack or a stroke, you put a little cayenne pepper under your tongue where your open arteries are. You do the same thing with cinnamon, and it basically opens up that area that is clogged. And then we have our sweet stuff over here, topping. So you want to make a peach cobbler. So think, peach cobbler, peach cobbler. What do you have? You have a crust. So you can or can't add that. So I have a cookie pan, not a cookie pan, but a pie plate. And I use that, but since I'm just doing this for just to show you how quick and fast this can be, we're actually just going to put it on one of these plates, I think. And then that way you can see that if you're just having a couple of people over for a card party or whatever little quick little entertaining thing that you might be doing in the summer, you can just put it out. You don't have to make it into a fancy dish or anything. But here are all of our sweeteners. So the peaches in and of themselves are sweet enough, so you just simply have to add a little something to it. So most people love to have whatever they have a little crunch to it. So that's why we're adding the nuts. Not to mention what? The walnut is in the shape of the brain as well as the lungs, so walnuts are very good for the brain and the lungs. And then we have some sweet agents here. We have raisins and we have dates. I told the guests that because they were talking about how sweet it was, I was saying dates are, I believe, the sweetest item on the planet, all by itself. And so I eat dates. These are medjool dates. I'm just pulling the little thing off the end. So I eat dates, pop in a couple of dates after training. It does a lot to just kind of rejuvenate the body. It's got a ton of minerals in it, in addition to the fact that they're so yummy, sweet, and taste good. They have a lot of minerals in it that are great for the body. We have some coconut here. Okay, so if you're paying attention, here's how you make your healthy, sweet dishes. We have some raw shredded coconut, and then we have maple syrup, and I put a tad bit of honey in there. Whenever you mix coconut and maple syrup together, that is like crack cocaine. I mean, that is about as sweet gets. I also have raisins, just to give you a little chewy, along with the dates. So this is like on the scale of sweet, 15 plus. Then we want to tone that down a bit. We don't just want to feel like we're biting into sugar. The peaches in and of themselves are going to help with that. But more importantly, instead of using a pie crust, which we could do, we could simply take 2 handfuls of almonds, put them into the food processor, throw in a few of the dates, and then press them into a pie plate. That would give us a very simple, basic crust in like 5 minutes. But instead of doing that, we just kind of want to be really raw about it. And I'm going to grab one other thing. Bear with me while I find some strawberries and or some raspberries. I think I'm going to use strawberries. I have a few strawberries left. Then we're going to top that. So strawberry, and then you think when you want to do things like that. So blueberries and peaches, I think are cool. Blueberries and peaches, strawberries and peaches. All I know is that I put this together the other day. In a couple of minutes, I've done something similar to it, but I was really working with what I had, and it was fabulous. So I figured I'd share it with you and just show you how quick and easy it is to do. The hardest thing to do, the most time-consuming thing, is going to basically be slicing up these peaches. So you have, and I decided instead of pre-slicing them, just in case someone has some difficulty with that, you'll see just how simple it is. So you take the peach, and basically, if you take the knife and continue to cut around until you feel like you're pressing into the seed, when it's ripe, it's going to peel right off relatively easy. So you can use however many you want, depending on how many people are coming. So remember, I just said depending on how many people are coming. So what if it was just me watching a movie and I just wanted a nice single sweet dessert? Now, with raw foods, I'll have to be honest, they taste better a day or two after you've put them together. And so just for the sake of time, if you want to be able to have a dessert like every night and you won't have 10-15 extra minutes, then you might want to put a little more together, and it's perfectly fine after you refrigerate it. I am going to just fill this up because it is so good, and it's pretty it'll last for quite a few days in the refrigerator. And worst case is you can stick it in a freezer and take it out. So something like this is great not only for a quick dessert, but also yummy peaches from the market. Also for a pick-you-up breakfast, if you are like me and you get up and you train in the morning and you kind of want to have a little bit more to refuel yourself after your workout, I may have something like this in addition to a green smoothie or something maybe mid-morning or a couple of hours after I've had my smoothie, just to kind of sustain me and put some energy back, especially when you're working out. It's been like a sauna. So now you're just going to slice these up. I quartered them. So now I'm going to go and I'm just going to half what I quartered. And it just depends on maybe what type of dish you're putting it in. When I was using the pie container, you could have very well had stuck them in there in quarter pieces. I think we're going to go and half the ones that we've already sliced. It's just up to you. I think that when you're eating food, whether it's raw or anything, I think it helps you when you focus a little on the presentation. I think, personally. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to dump this on here, because you know how people have the cheese boards now? That was a popular thing a couple of years ago anyway. And now they have all kinds of boards. I don't know any of them, but they're like all kinds of boards where it's a board like that, a cutting board, and it's got various types of foods that are in the same family groups. I'm drawing a blank, but I'm sure that you guys have seen the most popular ones here lately. And so we're just going to arrange our peaches. Now again, had you made the raw crust, which takes literally as long as it takes to grind some almonds and add some dates in there, this is about how long that takes to make, and then you just simply press it into a pie plate. I think I've done that for you before when we did the raw sweet potato pie. So you can zoom through the videos. So for those of you who watch us live on Facebook, I would really, really love if you would go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Sometimes I'm telling people about all of our videos on YouTube. And so we'll get 400 or 500 of you that will view us on Facebook. And so you don't have a need to go to YouTube. So here, look at that. You could just give them these and with some toothpicks on the side and let them eat some fresh fruit. Peaches are already on the sweet tart side. So let me show you how quick this is. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're not using a pie crust, but we want to have like the peach cobbler, the thing that makes a peach cobbler. It's not necessarily the pie crust, but I guess it is the crust. But it's the little strips, the little horizontal and vertical strips that are made out of pastry. That makes them very tasty. So we're going to recreate that. Starting with steel cut oats. What better way to get oats into your diet? I always tell people to say they eat oatmeal every day. That oatmeal is processed, so you're totally not getting the tons of nutrients that you find in raw oats. So this is a great way to get them in your diet. You simply buy steel cut oats and you put them in your blender and grind them down to a flour. Now I put this on a light grind so that it would still have, it wouldn't be completely silky on your tongue, like a flour, but a flour with a little texture. Then what you want to do is you want to add a tad bit of olive oil. This is really the trick here to making this taste like a pie pastry crust. And olive oil is a lubricant for the joints. The whole Mediterranean diet tells you all the great benefits of having a little olive oil. So just going to take that and just douse it around for a moment until it completely covers that cup or so of steel cut oats that I put in there. And again, please don't call in or text me about the recipe. You see the recipe. So whether you have 3 cups of steel cut oats, that's all on you in terms of if I have more, I'm going to have more filling over top of this. If I have less, I'm going to be eating more of the peach taste. So it just depends on what you want to do. And it ends up looking pretty much like this. You just want to make sure that you've coated the entire mixture of steel cut oats. Then we're going to add, now this is the trick here too, is that we're going to add some coconut. But because I didn't use 2 cups or so of oat flour, you don't want it to taste completely like coconut. So you have to kind of just blend and kind of do things so that you'll know the difference when you're doing it. You'll know if you feel like it's a coconut ball or it's a mixture of coconut and flour. That's about a little bit more, and that will be sufficient. Then we're going to add just a few raisins, not too many, because we don't want this to get too stiff. And then again, it's just gently tossing. Actually, that's looking like it could add some more. But I want to add some of the dates, and I'm going to have to cut those up. So I'm going to sit this over to the side, and I'm going to show you the process in which this needs to be done. And while I have the nuts and the cutting board. Did I have a cutting board? Did I have a cutting board? Yeah. So you could, these are walnut halves for the most part. So it's a bit much to chew at one time, so you just simply take your knife, and it's good that the cutting board is somewhat damp from the peaches, just to let them roll around, because you know I often talk about the fact that we should soak our nuts. But because the peaches are so juicy and we're going to douse this with some wet stuff, it'll be fine. And that's why you want to make them into pieces versus halves. So you just take your knife and roll over those for a second. You know, I try to eat 1/3 of the cup, which is a good handful, 1/3 of a pound, which is about a good handful of nuts on a daily basis. And so when you're doing that, you know you're going to be doing it on a daily basis. Then you do want to take an extra large bowl of nuts, say on a Sunday afternoon, walnuts, pecans, almonds, and then just put them into a bowl. Cover them with distilled water and just let them soak overnight. The next day you can spread them out, drain them and spread them out onto a cutting board or a cookie sheet. Take a paper towel and just kind of let them dry out for a couple of hours, and then you can can them, not can them, but put them into a glass jar and put them in a refrigerator, and then every day when you want to eat your 1/3 cup, they're already soaked. So I'm going to take a couple of these dates, and I'm only going to use a couple because they seem kind of hard for whatever reason. They're not as soft as they can be at times. Maybe I have them, wow. So we're going to take maybe 4. Dates have magnesium, copper, a bunch of stuff. So we're going to take a few of these, and we're just going to run the knife across them. Not too much because we have the coconut, we have maple syrup, so we have the peaches. We've got more than enough sweetness going on here. You could do the very same thing with apples. So we go back to our mixture bowl. We add our little handful of dates and the nuts. We continue to fold it just gently. Now when I've gotten this nice and covered, that's when I want to start adding just kind of have to play with the amount of maple syrup. So it thickens a little more, but not too much, where it starts to get like stiff. Now we want to make sure that we really taste our seasonings. So a trick for doing that is to take it and kind of be a little heavy directly over the peaches, apples, or whatever you decide to use. Apples would be good too, you know, that apple cobbler thing is what we would be creating. So a little bit of nutmeg followed by a little bit of cinnamon. Then I'm going to take a tad bit and add it to the combination as well. Something like this can be a little heavy with the seasoning blend. That's just about perfect. Then the larger spoon, so it kind of goes through the holes. And then you just top it. Kind of just throw it on. So it pretty much just covers it. So then when people scoop it out onto their plate, they'll get a combination of everything. It's almost like a peach strudel. That's so much better. Then if you have some left over, you can do something else with it. But you don't want to like completely cover it. Just kind of like throw it along the top. Now when you have the pie plate, if you want, instead of doing a pie crust, you can fill the plate with this. Put a little dribble on, a couple of spoonfuls, and then put the peaches over top of that, and then add more peaches. So it becomes like a layered strudel. So we have some left, but it's going to be enough. And then we're going to simply take some of these strawberries that I pulled. You know you're not supposed to eat the white part, that when the strawberry is not completely ripe, and they're usually like a quarter or sometimes 2/3 quarters of white external, you're not supposed to eat that piece. So we'll take it and just cut them, quarter them, slice, 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 slice very close to the leaf, quarter. Keep telling you guys I'm going to post a picture of the final thing. I'm hoping that for the most part you can see it. It's just always nice to see. And you should treat yourself well when you're making food for yourself or for guests. I think when you take a minute to have the presentation look nice, it'll help you enjoy your dinner more. Just kind of reward yourself. People spend a lot of money at restaurants because they spend a lot of time for presentation, but be good to yourself and present your own food for your own tummy in a manner that people charge you or have you pay a lot for. So we just don't want to overdo it with the strawberries. And then you take a little more of the topping, the pineapple. I mean, oh, that would have been good. Pineapple with this base. Pineapple on top of it would be really good. So then you just kind of take your maple syrup, and then you come back. I told you this is like sweet factor 1099, but this is more for presentation. And you just sprinkle a little bit of the coconut on top. Come back and put a few more walnut pieces. on top. Are you already tasting this? You can just see that it's just absolutely phenomenal. You know how something you just know is going to be great. So you do that, and I can tell you the only other thing is that there's a raw syrup, not syrup, but like a chocolate sauce that I do. It's really simple. You just add olive oil and maple syrup, blend it with raw carob powder, and it gives you a chocolate sauce that is incredible, and it lasts forever. It never goes bad. Olive oil, maple syrup, and raw carob powder. And if you wanted to just keep acting like a nut, you could put the final raisins on top of that. And if I were to put this on a white platter, then you could sprinkle that little black sauce all around it, and you could go put that on Who Wants to Be the Top Chef, and you would win hands down for presentation. So I'm going to clear all this away so that we can take a nice photo of that for you. And we'll figure out how to put it on a eating dish. So, when you're having hunger pains and a sweet tooth, and you want to calm that like you calm the storms in your life, then this is what you do. Just putting it together, smelling the different aromas, the simplicity of it. It literally takes a few minutes to do this, and it is just amazing. We're going to find a saucer here. Let's see. That would be too small of a saucer. And you can basically just take your scooper. It's not a good saucer, but it's okay. And then you would just scoop a piece on there. Just take a picture of this yet so that I can get a picture of that before I scoop it. And I can scoop it. I'm just going to let you guys imagine what that looks like. And that's pretty amazing. And it tastes incredible. So the finishing touch to this would be to scoop a reasonable portion onto a nice little, I think of the perfect bowl for that. So like a scooper bowl. One of these little containers. Just in case you guys want to have some company. So something like this. So you just scoop a portion in. Make sure that you get a little bit of everything. Some of the peaches, some of the strawberries. If you really want to be fancy, then you would take time ahead of the guests coming to make the individual containers. So everything that we just did to spread out on this, you can do them in individual containers. So that's like way more than enough. And then that's what you would have as a presentation. You know what you would do then? You would take some of the frozen ripened bananas I have in the freezer and run them through our little ice cream maker and put a scoop of raw banana ice cream on top. And then you take a little bit of your sprinkly things, cinnamon and nutmeg, and put on there. If not a cherry, or then you can throw some raspberries in there if you want to. But if you did the apple with the walnuts in the mixture, and then on top you would add blueberries to the apples, that would be a good combination, or the strawberries. But whatever you do, spice it up. Variety is the spice of life. This is a harmless meal. I mean, it has tons of good tasting sweet factor going on, and all it's going to do is allow you to have a really good bowel movement, because it's an excellent amount of raw fiber from the fruits, the steel cut oats, the dates. I mean, it's just so many nutrients in there. So while you're trying to satisfy a sweet tooth, your body is doing really well. Practicing the presence of God is something that will help get us through these times that we're dealing with. We've got another election coming up, and I'm sure that people are going to be really anxious and stressed. We've got an economy that's, not certain. So it's a lot of things that are going on. They're saying it's going to be an extremely hot summer, dealing with the wildfires for a good portion of the summer. So there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of killings going on. This is a perfect time to begin to start practicing a faith that allows you to have peace in the middle of these types of storms of life and just be calm. And so I hope that's been helpful. We'll see you in 2 weeks.